Welcome back to Book Bites, the channel where we dive into the heart of some of the most impactful books and give you quick, comprehensive summaries that get straight to the point. If you're looking for a quick yet profound take on the emotional roller coaster that is Jim Beaver's Life's That Way, you've come to the right place. This memoir isn't just about loss, it's about love, the unpredictability of life, and how we navigate through the darkest times. In this video, we'll break down the highs, the lows, and the personal reflections that make Life's That Way so powerful. Whether you're familiar with Jim from Supernatural or Deadwood, or just looking for a raw and emotional read, stick with us as we explore his journey of love, grief, and finding meaning in the face of tragedy. Let's get started. Introduction to Jim Beaver and the beginning of the memoir. Jim Beaver's Life's That Way is a deeply personal and poignant memoir that chronicles his emotional journey as he faces the devastating illness of his wife Cecily Adams and later her death from cancer. Jim, best known for his roles in television shows such as Supernatural and Deadwood, is not only an actor but a man who finds himself grappling with the overwhelming emotions that accompany loss, love, and personal growth. This memoir is a testament to his resilience, his relationship with Cecily, and the way that life, with all its unpredictability, forces individuals to find meaning in moments of great suffering. The book opens with a raw, candid look at Jim's life prior to Cecily's diagnosis. He introduces the reader to the woman who would become the love of his life, Cecily Adams, a woman of remarkable talent, beauty, and humor. She was the daughter of legendary actor Don Adams, famous for his role in Get Smart, and had made a name for herself in the entertainment industry as well, particularly as a casting director. They met through their mutual work in Hollywood and quickly fell in love. Their relationship was one of mutual admiration, intellectual stimulation, and a deep, abiding affection. The couple's life together, though fulfilling, was not without its challenges. Jim had faced his own set of struggles in the entertainment industry, often taking roles that were not particularly well known, but still offered him steady work. Cecily, on the other hand, had built a career behind the scenes, in casting, rather than in front of the camera. Despite this, their love story unfolded in a way that many would envy, a story filled with laughter, respect, and a shared sense of purpose. However, the course of their lives would soon change forever when Cecily was diagnosed with lung cancer. At the time of the diagnosis, she was only in her early 40s, a healthy woman in what seemed to be the prime of her life. The news came as a shock, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in Jim's life, one that would be defined by fear, hope, and heartbreak. In the initial chapters of the book, Jim writes about the disbelief and confusion he felt upon hearing Cecily's diagnosis. It was not just the cancer diagnosis that struck him, but the unfairness of it all. Cecily had never been a smoker, and the cancer seemed to come out of nowhere. The couple was thrust into a world they knew little about. Hospitals, treatments, and a reality that most people only ever see from the outside. Jim chronicles their attempts to stay positive, their determination to fight the disease together, and the new realities they had to navigate. One of the most striking aspects of the early part of the memoir is Jim's writing about the psychological impact of Cecily's diagnosis on him and their relationship. He writes candidly about how he tried to balance his role as a caretaker with his emotional needs and the strain that such a challenging life event placed on both of them. The day-to-day realities of caregiving became exhausting for Jim, as they often involved emotional ups and downs, with moments of hope followed by crushing setbacks. Jim's personal reflections on the toll that this experience took on him as a man and as a husband are heartbreaking but beautifully written. He describes the isolation that many caregivers experience, as well as the sense of helplessness that accompanies watching a loved one suffer. There are moments when he talks about his own fear, his loneliness, and his desire to find some meaning in the suffering. And yet, throughout this difficult period, there was a constant undercurrent of love between Jim and Cecily, a love that, despite the disease, remained steadfast. As Jim writes, the memoir not only focuses on the immediate impact of Cecily's illness, but also examines the deeper, existential questions that arise in the face of such hardship. For Jim, there was a need to find purpose, to understand why this was happening to Cecily, and to navigate the ever-present question of how to live in the face of imminent death. The book takes on a reflective tone, with Jim examining not just the physical realities of the illness, but also the emotional and philosophical questions that come with a terminal diagnosis. The tone of the memoir in the first part is deeply emotional. Jim allows the reader access to his innermost thoughts and feelings, laying bare his confusion, sorrow, and frustration. But alongside these more somber emotions, there is also a sense of quiet determination. Jim never gives up on Cecily or on the hope that things might improve, even as their reality becomes more uncertain. This part of the book serves as a powerful introduction to the complex emotional landscape that Jim will continue to navigate as Cecily's illness progresses. As the book progresses into the second part, Jim delves deeper into the details of their fight against cancer. He recounts the various treatments, hospital visits, and the continuous struggle to maintain normalcy in their lives despite the overwhelming presence of the disease. Jim writes with incredible honesty about the frustration of having to watch someone you love in pain and about the toll that the process takes on not only the person who is ill, but also on those around them. The emotional strain of being a caregiver becomes even more apparent as the memoir shifts toward more of the logistical details of life with cancer. In addition to his caregiving responsibilities, Jim continues to work during this period, although he admits that it becomes increasingly difficult to focus on his career. He has always been an actor, but his passion for the work is put to the test as he faces the enormous personal challenge of caring for his wife. Jim's reflections on the interplay between his professional life and his personal struggles offer a rare glimpse into the often overlooked emotional toll that celebrities experience behind the scenes. The book never shies away from presenting Jim as a complex, multidimensional individual, one who is caught between the demands of his public career and the intense private suffering he is undergoing. Through all the ups and downs, Jim remains committed to his wife. His devotion to Cecily, even in the face of her illness, is evident throughout the book, and his deep love for her remains a central theme. But as the book progresses, it becomes increasingly clear that Cecily's illness is taking a toll on Jim in ways that he cannot fully express. The first part of the memoir ends with a sense of foreboding, as Jim faces the uncertainty of what lies ahead for them, the struggles with treatment and growing realities of loss. As Jim Beaver delves further into the story of his and Cecily's battle against cancer, the memoir becomes even more focused on the grueling realities of chemotherapy, hospital visits, and the emotional toll of watching Cecily's health deteriorate. Despite the initial shock of the diagnosis, they both initially held on to the hope that with treatment, she could recover. But as time goes on, this hope is slowly chipped away by the harsh realities of cancer treatment. The memoir chronicles the various phases of Cecily's illness, each one more difficult than the last, and the ways in which Jim copes with the escalating sense of helplessness that comes with watching someone you love suffer. One of the most striking aspects of this section of the book is Jim's depiction of the intense emotional dichotomy that comes with being a caregiver for a terminally ill loved one. There are moments of optimism where Jim and Cecily find ways to laugh together, reminisce about their early days as a couple, and even dream about the future. However, these moments are often fleeting, as they are repeatedly overshadowed by the brutal realities of cancer treatment. Jim paints a picture of the constant cycle of hope and despair, periods of apparent improvement followed by worsening symptoms and hospitalizations. Through it all, Jim is forced to confront the very real possibility of losing Cecily, a thought he is not ready to fully acknowledge, but one that he can't escape. In one of the more heart-wrenching sections of the book, Jim describes the toll that cancer takes on Cecily's body. At the time of the diagnosis, she was a vibrant and beautiful woman, full of life and ambition. But as the disease progresses, her appearance and health deteriorate. Chemotherapy, while necessary, takes away her strength, causing nausea, hair loss, and the draining fatigue that cancer patients often experience. Jim writes with great tenderness about how even as Cecily becomes physically weaker, their emotional bond only strengthens. The memoir reflects a bittersweet paradox. Though her body is failing, the love and connection between them endure. He admits that there are times when he feels powerless, unable to protect her or make her well again. But he never stops being there for her, never stops loving her. This section of the memoir also introduces the concept of waiting, which becomes a recurring theme throughout the book. Jim writes about how they both had to learn to live in a state of suspended time, always waiting for the next test result, the next piece of news, the next phase of treatment. The constant anticipation and uncertainty of what might happen next becomes overwhelming for both of them. It's a period of deep emotional and psychological strain, but it also reveals the depth of their connection. Jim's writing here is filled with moments of frustration, sadness, and exhaustion, but also moments of quiet grace. Even when everything around them is falling apart, there are still glimpses of the love that defined their relationship. However, as the months pass, it becomes increasingly clear that Cecily's cancer is not responding to treatment. There is a growing sense of inevitability as Jim watches his wife's health decline. He writes about how, despite the unrelenting nature of the illness, he continues to hold on to hope, though this hope is increasingly tinged with despair. The memoir chronicles not only the physical changes Cecily undergoes, but also the emotional toll that the impending loss takes on both of them. Jim is forced to reconcile with the fact that he cannot save her, that no amount of love or treatment can stop the progression of the disease. This realization is one of the hardest for him to come to terms with, and it leads to an emotional reckoning. Throughout this period, Jim continues to care for Cecily with unwavering dedication. He writes about the demands of being her primary caregiver, managing medications, coordinating hospital visits, and doing everything he can to make her comfortable. But at the same time, he is becoming emotionally and physically drained. He discusses the isolation that caregivers often feel as they are constantly focused on the needs of the person they love, but rarely have the time or energy to care for themselves. Jim reflects on the difficulty of maintaining his own emotional well-being in the face of such overwhelming circumstances. It's a painful acknowledgement, but one that underscores the reality that caregiving often comes at the expense of the caregiver's own health and emotional stability. In parallel with these struggles, Jim begins to face his own personal grief. While he continues to support Cecily through her illness, he also must grapple with the growing sense of loss that haunts him. He writes about how he begins to prepare himself, albeit reluctantly, for the reality that Cecily may not make it. He reflects on the love they've shared, the life they've built together, and the future that will never come to pass. This section of the memoir is marked by a deep sense of sorrow and resignation as Jim begins to face the most difficult truth of all, that no matter how much he loves Cecily, there is nothing he can do to stop her from slipping away. It is also during this period that Jim reflects on the role of faith in their lives. While neither he nor Cecily had ever been particularly religious, the spiritual aspects of their lives begin to take on a new meaning as they confront the reality of death. Jim writes about the way in which they both search for some sense of peace and understanding in the face of such profound loss. At times, this search feels futile, but at other moments, it offers a glimmer of solace. Through his exploration of faith, Jim provides the reader with an honest look at how individuals cope with death, how the question of an afterlife, of meaning, and of purpose takes on greater significance when one is faced with the inevitability of death. Throughout this section, the memoir shifts between moments of intense grief and quiet reflection. Jim begins to realize that the fight against cancer is not just a physical battle, but an emotional one that changes him as much as it changes Cecily. He is forced to confront the fragility of life, and in doing so, he gains a new understanding of the human condition and his own place within it. As the memoir progresses, Jim's voice remains raw and honest, yet there is an underlying sense of strength that emerges. He is faced with the hardest challenge of his life, but he continues to navigate it with grace, humor, and a love for Cecily that never fades. While the chapter ends on a note of sadness, it also reflects the enduring power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of finding meaning in the face of loss. The end of the fight, grief, and reflection on life after loss. As the memoir nears its conclusion, Jim Beaver faces the inevitable, the loss of his beloved wife, Cecily. The final chapters of Life's That Way are filled with heart-wrenching moments of grief and the struggle to accept the finality of death. Jim continues to care for Cecily in her final days, and as her condition worsens, he is confronted with the terrifying reality of what it means to lose someone who has been his constant companion. The emotional and physical exhaustion from the prolonged battle against cancer reaches a breaking point. Jim writes with unflinching honesty about the toll that the illness has taken on him and the overwhelming sense of helplessness that he feels in these final moments. One of the most emotional aspects of the final chapters is Jim's portrayal of Cecily's last days. The disease has ravaged her body, but Jim's commitment to her remains unwavering. He reflects on how, in those last moments, he wished that there were something more he could do, some way to ease her suffering further, or even to stop time so that they could have just a little more time together. He writes about the tenderness with which he cared for her, from the smallest gestures of comfort to the profound sense of loss that he began to feel even before she passed away. It's in these moments that Jim's grief becomes palpable, and the reader is drawn deeply into the pain he's experiencing. Cecily's death marks the culmination of Jim's journey through illness and caregiving, but it also signals the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by mourning, loneliness, and the painful task of figuring out how to live without her. In the aftermath of her passing, Jim is left to grapple with a profound sense of emptiness. He writes candidly about how he feels as though his world has been turned upside down, as if the center of his universe has been taken from him. He describes the loneliness that comes with losing a spouse, the quiet moments when the reality of the loss settles in and becomes almost too much to bear. In addition to his personal grief, Jim writes about the struggle of returning to a normal life, one that no longer includes Cecily. He confesses that the days following her death are a blur, filled with a deep sense of sorrow, confusion, and a lingering feeling of guilt. He questions whether he could have done more for her, whether he was truly there for her in every way she needed. These feelings of doubt and self-recrimination are common for those who have lost loved ones, and Jim's reflections are raw and honest as he explores the emotional complexity of grief. The theme of guilt is especially prominent in this section, as Jim tries to come to terms with the fact that he wasn't able to save Cecily. While he recognizes that there was nothing more he could have done, there are moments when the pain of her death feels unbearable, and the thought that he could have been a better husband or caregiver lingers. Jim's vulnerability in expressing these feelings makes the memoir incredibly relatable to anyone who has gone through a similar experience of loss, as it demonstrates that grief is often accompanied by a great deal of self-reflection and doubt. However, despite the overwhelming sadness that defines this section of the memoir, Jim also writes about the process of healing. He reflects on how, in time, the sharp edges of his grief began to dull, and he started to find ways to move forward. The emotional devastation of losing Cecily is something that he can never fully escape. But he begins to understand that healing is not about forgetting her or moving on, but about learning to live with the pain and honoring the love they shared. Jim writes about the process of mourning as an ongoing journey, one that doesn't have a clear end point, but is instead marked by small steps forward, even when it feels impossible. In the later chapters of the memoir, Jim starts to find solace in the memories of his time with Cecily. He writes about the small moments that meant the most, the times when they laughed together, the way she made him feel understood and supported, and the love they shared despite all the challenges they faced. Through these memories, Jim begins to find meaning in the experience of losing Cecily. The love they shared is a light that continues to guide him, even in the darkest of times. Jim also reflects on how this period of his life has changed him. The experience of caregiving, of being so intimately connected with someone through illness and death, has left an indelible mark on him. He writes about the way that loss shapes a person's identity, altering how one views the world and their place within it. For Jim, the loss of Cecily has made him more aware of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing the moments we have with the people we love. In many ways, the memoir is a meditation on how to live in the face of death, a reminder that life is fleeting and that we must find meaning in every moment. As he reflects on his life after Cecily's death, Jim acknowledges that he will never be the same person he was before her illness. The grief will always be a part of him, but he learns to live with it, to carry it as a testament to the love he had for her. In this way, the memoir ends not with a sense of closure, but with a recognition of the ongoing nature of grief and the enduring power of love. Jim's journey through loss is not about finding a neat resolution, but about accepting the complexities of love and loss and embracing the idea that life is not always fair, but it is still worth living. Through his writing, Jim Beaver offers an intimate and emotionally honest portrait of love, loss, and resilience. Life's That Way is not just a story of a man losing his wife. It is a profound exploration of what it means to endure the most painful of experiences while still finding meaning and purpose in life. Jim's ability to write with such vulnerability and insight makes the memoir not only a tribute to Cecily, but a universal reflection on the human condition. Ultimately, Life's That Way is a book about the unpredictable journey of life and how we as individuals are called to respond to its challenges. It's about learning to live with loss, about finding love even in the darkest times, and about discovering that life, while full of sorrow and pain, is also full of beauty, connection, and meaning. Jim's memoir is a testament to the power of the human spirit and to the ways in which we continue to live, love, and find meaning, even after the most profound losses. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into Life's That Way by Jim Beaver. If you found this summary meaningful or insightful, be sure to give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more book breakdowns from Book Bites. Jim's journey through grief and love reminds us all that, even in the darkest times, there's always room for hope, connection, and growth. What did you think of the memoir? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Did Jim's story resonate with you? And as always, if you have a book you'd love to see us break down, drop it in the comments and we'll add it to the list. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.